The inaugural season of the PWHL has kicked off, and there is plenty of excitement around this new professional women's hockey league. Let's talk about it today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, we have to start off by giving a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads, our everydayers who tune in to talk hockey with us each and every weekday. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend just a part of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer at The Hockey News, and today I am going to be joined by my great friend, Erica Ayala. She is going to join us to introduce us to the PWHL, the new Professional Women's Hockey League. Before we dive into all that, though, I do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Our Locked On Pred heads know today's guest very, very well. We are going to be talking with Erica Ayala. Erica is the founder of Black Rosie Media. She is, of course, the host of Locked On Kraken. She is a writer and analyst for more sports than I could possibly list in a 30-minute podcast. And she has covered women's hockey at the Olympics and across the country at all different levels. Today, we are going to be talking with Erica about the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League. We're going to learn about the league, about the teams, the growth of the sport, and she's going to introduce you to some players you may need to know. I am joined right now by my dear friend and the co-host of Locked On Kraken, Erica L. Ayala. Erica, of course, like I said, covers the Locked On Kraken. She is also what I like to think of as my own personal expert into the wide variety and interesting storylines in women's hockey. So I've invited Erica to join us today for what I love to call a PWHL primer. We are talking about the Women's Professional Hockey League and all that entails. Erica, I wanted to do this show for a while now. I know I missed the beginning. I know I missed the kickoff of the season, but we are jumping in now, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on to do this.
Oh, absolutely. And always a nice time when we can get together, squadcast, and talk about women's hockey. We've been doing this since I was in Beijing covering the Olympics. So I know that seems like forever ago, but glad to be back here with you. And no worries, you didn't catch the puck drop on January 1. I mean, I personally was in Seattle with the Seattle Kraken. So, but there's plenty to catch up with now. And it's a perfect time because similarly to the NHL, the PWHL took a little bit of a break, and that's more because of an international break. A lot of teams, including the United States and Canada, had either kind of what is traditionally known as Four Nations, little tournaments or exhibition games like the rivalry series. So it's a good time right now to catch up with the PWHL.
Yep. And I think it's a great time for people who love hockey to jump into this. So want to get them the information they need about it. So first of all, I want to start with, and I know this could be a long explanation, but I just kind of want to get, what is the origin story of this new league, the PWHL? How did this kind of come about? Where did it come from? Kind of give us a brief timeline of women's professional hockey.
Well, you're right. This could be like a whole series in and of itself, but to keep it pretty short, the PWHL came from two direct origin stories. One is that there was a group called the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, the PWHPA, and they were a group that was barnstorming for a while. Some of them had played in the former Canadian Women's Hockey League that closed its doors in 2019. Some played in the National Women's Hockey League, which then changed names to the Premier Hockey Federation, the PHF. And essentially, they wanted to envision a league, a women's hockey league in North America specifically, that just was a step above what had ever been seen before. So that was the PWHPA. I mentioned also the PHF, the Premier Hockey Federation, and they were in operation until last year. Actually, the Toronto Six won the last ever Isabel Cup championship, which was their version of the final trophy at the end of the season. And then they were getting ready to start what would have been their 8th season. And then the league that exists now, the Professional Women's Hockey League, the board of directors acquired the PHF. So too long didn't read. If you know a little bit about the history of the NHL, then you know that the NHL was created by a conglomerate, a group of owners that was a part of other iterations of men's hockey. And, you know, they had little tiffs here, little squabbles there. And then a group came together and they sort of, no pun intended, iced some of the other people out. This is a very broad kind of, you know, not drunk history, although I'm totally down for that too next time. But, you know, just a kind of like a simplistic history of hockey history. And so it's a little bit similar to that in that there were a lot of different options, but none of the options were like, you know, the Goldilocks right fit for a lot of the players. And then the PWHL came around and is the best attempt, at least a lot of the players consider this to be the best attempt at the most professional women's hockey league in North America that has ever existed to date.
So kind of want to lean into that a little bit. What is unique and helpful and beneficial from the player's point of view about this particular league? And what are some areas where you feel like, hey, there's some opportunities for growth in this league, you know, in the future as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just for those who maybe don't know, I know you know, Anne, but I was a broadcaster with the former league that was acquired by the PWHL. And so the first thing that I will say is that the PWHL is leaps and bounds ahead when it comes to broadcast quality. They have multiple camera angles, you know, just the staffing alone that they have now for these broadcasts is much better than anything that I was a part of. And I still call women's and men's hockey games in Hockey East. And so it's really a step above and much closer to what I experienced when I got to call an NHL game. And that was only on the radio. So this is definitely from a broadcast quality, much better. We also are seeing that the PWHL actually is the first women's league and probably among the first men's leagues, at least especially the big kind of top 5 men's leagues, where a collective bargaining agreement was put into place before the league actually started play. A lot of leagues, the National Hockey League included, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they had to work in CBAs. Players had to do that as the leagues went on to have a little bit more autonomy and have more player rights. So one of the staples for the PWHL for a lot of the players is that they started with a CBA. Now, as someone who covers other women's leagues, I think one thing I would say that could improve is the substance of that CBA. But, you know, happy to come back and talk about that and why. But I think other things that we're seeing that are great is that a lot of people believe that this league is bringing together the best talent to really have a true best on best league. I think I understand why people are saying that. I think it's it leans a little bit more into marketing than into reality. And there are a few different reasons, because some of the best players, arguably in women's hockey, are still in college. They're not even eligible to play professional hockey. So that's number one. And number two is, I keep saying North American League because there are other leagues that exist in other parts of the world. And a lot of the players who play in the PWHL have played in those leagues in their professional career, those who've played in pro leagues before. And so it's a little bit difficult, I think, just with a lot of the starts and stops, to definitively say that one league is premier, if you will. We're not quite there yet when it comes to sorting that out, but I totally think that the PWHL has a strong case to make when it comes to that. And then I think other ways that, and some of this is a little bit related to the CBA, or at least how I see it, some of the things that are a little bit challenging and that I hope will iron themselves out as we move forward is that the PWHL acquired the PHF about 6 months before they dropped the puck on January 1st, 2024 for their inaugural season. That's not a long runway at all. And so there are some things in the CBA that I think are vague. And I am of the opinion that you shouldn't sign a vague contract. Just bad practice overall. And I understand why that's been done this year. And, you know, I think it's just everyone establishing that, hey, we want this league to work. We want to work together to make it work. So I think over time, we'll see a little bit more of a separation between the Players Association and the league. But right now, they're a little bit jumbled together. I think another thing that's worth noting that might not be a problem, but has been a problem in other women's hockey leagues, is that it's a single ownership entity. So there are 6 teams. They are using the moniker Original Six, which, again, a lot of men's hockey fans know from the National Hockey League. Right. That being said, the single ownership entity did become a little bit of a challenge in the preceding league when they started selling individual teams, because you would have some teams that were owned by the same ownership group, and that effectively gave that group a voting block and a voting majority. And quite honestly, that's what ended up leading to that league getting acquired, because the majority block was able to vote that and pass that. So not necessarily something that we have to worry about right now, but as the league continues to grow, there's already interest in expansion. You know, that might be something that becomes challenging down the road.
Coming up, Erica is going to introduce us to the Original Six of the PWHL. But first, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We are joined today by our great friend Erica Ayala to talk about the PWHL. She's going to talk to us now about the Original Six of the PWHL and what the locations of games tells us about the appeal of women's hockey. So you mentioned the Original Six teams in the PWHL. So real quick, let's talk through what are those teams, and even just an overview of like, how did we land where we landed? Why does basically what I want to know is, why doesn't Nashville have one, and when is that coming?
Great question. And the NWHL in its last year as the one of its last years as the NWHL before it rebranded as the PHF. I know lots of acronyms. I'll help you through it. But the Nashville Predators actually hosted the NWHL All-Star Weekend. I believe that was in 2019. Great weekend. I was one of the broadcasters. I was actually between the benches for that in Nashville. So it was amazing. Come on. So much fun. So much fun. So hopefully Nashville, if they don't get a team outright, will host one of the neutral site games, which is something I can also talk about if you want, because we have a few that were announced. But so the teams were chosen, and a lot of them will kind of match up with, again, what people know, at least in the, as I sometimes like to say, MNHL Original Six, including New York. And they're a little complicated because they actually play in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and in New York. Then you have Toronto and Boston. Now, Minnesota would not be considered an Original Six in the National Hockey League, but But if you know anything about Minnesota, especially girls and women's hockey, Minnesota, known as the state of hockey, the WCHA is at least has some of their teams in Minnesota. And outside of Clarkson University, this is at the NCAA level, all teams that have ever won a national championship have come from the WCHA. So that's a very Midwestern, but specifically Minnesota focused area. So it made a lot of sense to have a team in Minnesota. And then so you've, and I should have said this earlier, but there are actually 6 teams, 3 in the US, 3 in Canada. So I already mentioned Toronto, but the other Canadian markets, which I do think makes sense, just when you look at hockey hotbeds, are Ottawa and Montreal. So again, just to run that through, and I'll actually run this through in the order that they are in the standings right now. You have Montreal. Right. Montreal is leading the league right now with 17 points. Then you have Minnesota with 15 points. Then you have a 3-way traffic jam with 11 points on the board between Boston, Toronto, and New York. And then Ottawa hanging in there with 10 points. But a lot of those points have come, and the point structure is a little bit different in the PWHL. And so they've been going to overtime a lot, but losing in overtime a lot. So that's why they can't quite get through the hump and find themselves at the bottom of the basement when it comes to that. But yeah, so another thing worth noting, and this probably goes into something that wouldn't have been my choice, but with 6 months between when you announced and when you start, it's just one of those things that we have to deal with. But the teams don't actually have names. They don't have individual logos. So they're using the league PWHL logo and the PWHL name, and then insert city. So the Montreal team is called PWHL Montreal. And I think you can then figure out what the rest of the teams are called from there.
I think I can Scooby-Doo it. Yep.
Yeah, you can probably sort it out for yourself. They do have their own independent colors, although Minnesota is a dark purple and the league is using like interchangeably all kinds of hues of purple. So Minnesota is the only one that maybe doesn't have its own identity because it shares a color with the league. But other than that, they have their own colors. You've got maybe like a magenta, I would say, and then a maroon, Montreal and Ottawa, or maybe Ottawa's a little more red. I mean, it really depends on, you know, what the hex number is that you're using and how you're looking at it. Boston is a green color. Toronto is blue, kind of like not a cardinal, maybe more on the canary side. And then PWHL New York trying to lean into that kind of aquamarine, anywhere from like patina, which is the Statue of Liberty color, to like an aqua kind of green kind of vibe. That's the spectrum for the New York team from a color perspective.
I love it. Okay, so we've talked about the team names, kind of how they landed, where they landed for these original 6. Talk to me about the year. How many games are in the season for the PWHL, and what does the playoff structure look like in this league?
Well, the second question is a TBD. It's one of those things that's a TBD in the CBA, so we don't know just yet. We'll find out. Yeah, it's one of those things that hasn't been announced. That's not unusual for women's hockey leagues, although it is something that I think should be extinct. Like, let's kind of know what the playoff structure is going to be when we start. Like, maybe let's do that. But anyway, what can we do? We move on. So the way that the league is structured, each team, I believe, will have 10, it's either 10 or 12 home games in their home market, and or where they are the home team, because some games, I alluded to this earlier, but some games will be played at neutral sites. And that is because, again, with 6 months, they had to kind of rock with what arenas were able to accommodate their schedule, knowing they wanted to drop the puck January 1. So just to give a quick example, for those who know your hockey history, your men's hockey history, Toronto actually hosted the first ever NHL All-Star Weekend, which I actually just learned was a fundraiser for a player that got injured during a scuffle. And actually the opposing team in a act of good faith wanted to do a fundraiser, and it became kind of this all-star event, but to fundraise for his medical bills. Anyway, yeah, right. So that happened at what's known as Maple Leaf Gardens, which is in downtown Toronto proper, which is now at the former Ryerson, but now they go by Toronto Metropolitan University, TMU campus. And that now is called Mattamy Athletic Center. That seats about 2,000 people. So PWHL Toronto has been selling out, but only at about 2,000, 2,300. Well, as it turns out, at the NHL All-Star Weekend, where they had the women's showcase, which this year for the first time was branded and marqueed under the league name and not just as a women's event, they announced at Scotiabank Arena that the game between PWHL Toronto, who will be the home team, against Montreal, so there's a big little rivalry there. A big little, that's ridiculous, but anyway.
But I'm tracking.
A nice, yeah, thank you. A nice rivalry there. And so that's actually going to be at Scotiabank Arena, where the 2024 NHL All-Star game was, and they've already sold that out. So we're seeing really great numbers there. And so, but that's a little bit of just to also paint a picture that the arenas go anywhere from UBS Arena, which is where New York plays some of their games. 4 of their home games they're playing at UBS. The others they're playing in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Then you have Minnesota that plays at the Excel Center, which is where the Minnesota Wilds play. And then you have other smaller markets. And so the PWHL is a little bit all over the map when it comes to what they have capacity for. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how they restructure, if they restructure at all, when they have a little bit more time to establish where is a good arena to fit the demand, which has already been, they're already have broken multiple records when it comes to women's professional hockey in North America, with the attendance that they've been able to receive through the PWHL. So I know I packed like a lot into that comment about arenas, but it's just to show you that this was a very ambitious league with that 6-month runway. But even the early returns are showing what I've always known, because women's hockey has been on the rise for a while. It's just that the market has been, I would say, arbitrarily in that there's always been support for women's hockey, but the people with the money bags have arbitrarily set the ceiling at a nominal, at a what I would say a pedestrian rate for what the actual interest is in women's hockey. And I think the great thing about the PWHL so far is that it's showing exactly that, is that they are capping out. Scotiabank Arena has been sold out. Arena, XL Center has been sold out. They're expecting really good crowds at PPG Paints, which is going to be one of the neutral sites. And Pittsburgh has been hosting women's events at the international level, the college level, and the pro level for the last 8 years. So that's going to be another big one coming up. And also Little Caesars Arena in Detroit is going to be one of the other neutral site arenas. They actually also announced that the college arena at the University of Minnesota, they announced it just today at the day that we're recording, they are going to host an event at the UM campus, which is massive, again, in the state of Minnesota, and for hockey overall in that area. So we're seeing pretty good returns, and the product on the ice has been pretty good too, Anne.
There are plenty of superstars playing in the PWHL. Coming up, Erica is going to introduce us to some of the stars of the league. But first, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Whether you are interested in checking out a Predators game, a Vanderbilt baseball game, Beetlejuice the musical at TPAC, or Enrique Iglesias at Bridgestone Arena, Game Time is the one place to go for the best ticket deals. Game Time's all-in prices show you your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you even check out. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps, and they are sent directly to your phone. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So hoping to get some more of our Locked On Predators listeners kind of tuning into what is happening in women's hockey. You had mentioned, you covered women's hockey in Beijing for the Olympics. I got to be a part of covering women's hockey for the Locked On Network. And I have to tell you, absolutely thrilling. And so what I was hoping we could kind of wrap up with here is give me some names, because here's what people who may not be as familiar with women's hockey need to know. There are superstars on the ice playing women's hockey right now. And there are players that you need to see play. So talk to me about who are some of the standout players when you look at this league that you say, you know what, this is a player that you really want to catch them in a game. You want to see them play.
Well, let's just start. You can always start with the players that are at the top of the standings when it comes to, or the top of the stats when it comes to the league so far. And Alex Carpenter is a name that you and I would have talked about. She played for USA Hockey during the Beijing Olympics, and she is leading the league right now with 11 points. And the breakdown is almost even. She has 5 goals and 6 assists, and she plays for PWHL New York. She's one of their alternate captains there. Forward Alex Carpenter, her father, Bobby Carpenter, played in, and is particularly known for playing in Boston. She played for the Boston Pride in the NWHL, the league that I said rebranded as the PHF. So she's got Boston ties there, but has shipped from Boston down to New York for this season. Then I want to take you to the third, tied, I guess, for second overall in scoring is Ella Shelton. Ella Shelton actually scored the first ever goal in PWHL history. She's a defender who plays for Hockey Canada and is on the PWHL New York team. So she's teammates with Alex Carpenter. She's got 9 points, 3 goals, 6 assists, and actually scored the first goal in the 3-on-3 showcase at the 2024 NHL All-Star Game. And then sandwiched between those is a player that I think most anyone knows if you know anything about women's hockey, especially Hockey Canada, and that is Captain Canada. No, not Sid Crosby, but the one and only Marie-Philippe Poulin, also known lovingly as Captain Canada and Captain Clutch and MPP. She's playing for the PWHL Montreal team. She has 6 goals, 3 assists. She started a little quote unquote slow out the gate in her first 2 games for Montreal, and then actually against New York at UBS Arena, she spoiled their home opener at UBS by scoring a hat trick in that game and really hasn't relented a top spot scoring wise. I also want to give a shout out to Natalie Spooner. She's one of a handful of moms who's returning to the ice after giving birth, and she's always been a fantastic player, has played professionally in some of the other leagues that existed in the Toronto area. She prioritized being able to play in Toronto. Just a real quick thing. Your listeners might be familiar with no trade clauses. Some are very restrictive and some are a little more loose. Well, in the PWHL, since effectively everyone was participating in an expansion draft, what they did is they had a compassionate waiver. And so not exactly a like for like with a no trade clause, but this is where a player like someone like Natalie Spooner, who's a first-time mom, has a young child at home, is establishing her family in the greater Toronto area, can prioritize and say that she strongly wants to stay in a market. And so it worked out that her compassionate waiver was granted and Toronto picked her up in the draft. and she's top 5 in scoring and has really been on a tear for Toronto and helped them rise in the standings. I have to go quickly to goaltending because, again, when we covered the Olympics, we talked a lot about goaltending, and some of the names that we mentioned during the Beijing Olympics are here, such as Nicole Hensley, Anne-Renee Desbiens, Maddie Rooney, Emrance Mashmeyer. But it's actually been some new names or names of players who are not new to women's pro hockey, but have never really cracked their national teams. Elaine Chuli is leading the league in goals against average at a 1.31 clip. She plays for Montreal and is kind of effectively their backup, even though she was the go-to goaltender for the Toronto Six in the league last in the PHF and the last year of that league. She was their starting netminder, but now she's splitting time with Olympian Anne-Renee Desbiens. And I want to also shout out Corrine Schroeder. She got the first ever shutout in PWHL history. She also plays for PWHL New York. PWHL New York is so interesting because they have individuals who are crushing it in the PWHL. They're kind of like the Edmonton Oilers in that way, that they have like, or sometimes the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? They have individuals that crush it, right? But as a team, it's just not like teaming. You feel me? Like they're not getting it all together. But Corrine Schroeder has been crushing it. She is top 3 when it comes to goals against average. And her workload, she sees a lot of shots. And that's what she did when she played for the Boston Pride as well, where she was Rookie of the Year there. So, but her save percentage, a 9.43, she's crushing it. Erin Frankel, another goaltender, an up-and-coming star for USA Hockey. She's a 9.27 save percentage and playing for PWHL Boston. So those are just some of the names. I could go on and on, especially with international talent. I was so high on Team Czechia during that Olympics, and they're showing in this league once again why they are a team to watch. So when we talk women's hockey again, I'll just have to break that down for you next time.
We'll do a whole international players in women's hockey thing. I'm so excited for you to come on and talk about this again for our, Locked On Predators fans. We have a lot of exciting hockey happening right here in Nashville, but really want to let people know about this league and about the fact that there is some phenomenal hockey being played in this new league, and really wanted people to check it out. For people who want to follow up, who want to dive into this league, who want to learn some more about these players and kind of pick their team, Erica, where can people find your work on women's hockey?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, first, we have to stay in-house. We actually do have a women's hockey segment that we're hoping that will continue to grow. Right now, it's every other Friday as a part of the Locked On NHL show. We do a segment called the Women's Hockey Spotlight that I host alongside Rachel Donner and Gil Martin, who are the hosts of that Friday show. I'm also doing more with Locked On NHL on specifically with shorts, and so kind of our short form video. So I'll be giving you the stars of the week. We just had our first PWHL trade, so I'll have that up on the Locked On NHL channel, so you can definitely follow there. But if you want a deeper dive, I do live streams on my platform, Black Rosie Media, and we do those weekly, usually on either Wednesday or Thursday, a little later in the week. So you can follow Black Rosie Media if you want more in-depth coverage of women's hockey.
I want to thank Erica Ayala one more time for joining me today to talk about the PWHL and to share some insight and information about this exciting new opportunity in women's professional hockey. Of course, tonight, the Nashville Predators are in action. They're going to take on the Vegas Golden Knights. The game is scheduled for 9 p.m. Central Time. On tomorrow's show, we will have your complete game recap, including one word to describe whatever we see on the ice tonight. In the meantime, be sure to follow the podcast on social media at LO_Predators. You can, of course, check out the podcast on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe there so you will know the minute we drop our new episodes. That's going to do it for us today at the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow to talk Nashville Golden Knights. We'll see you then.